This is the Landlord Briefing for the Rosenberg Housing Authority's Housing Choice Voucher Program. If you are seeking to be a landlord for the Rosenberg Housing Authority, there are certain information that the Housing Authority will make available to you. One of which is that we can give you the family's current address if we have that information on file. We can give you the names and addresses of current and previous landlords if we have that available. You can be assured that the family is income eligible for the program, that they have not committed a felony in the last 5 years, and they are not on a lifetime sex offender registry. We cannot give you any information about a tenant's tenancy history, and we cannot provide you with any information regarding their criminal history. In order to lease up a family, the first step you must do is receive a yellow inspection packet from a voucher holder who's looking to lease your unit. You need to carefully read through the inspection packet and fill out all forms and sign all documents. If this is your first time as a landlord for the Housing Authority, your tenant should also provide you with a green landlord packet that is yours to keep, and it gives you all the information that you need about becoming a landlord. But the last few forms, starting with the landlord certification form, needs to be filled out and returned to the Housing Authority. Make sure that after you've completed the yellow inspection packet, that you make sure the family has passed all your eligibility checks before submitting the yellow packet back to the Housing Authority. The request for tenancy approval is a HUD required form that must be filled out completely before we can schedule the unit for an inspection. Ensure that you fill in the box that says the date the unit will be available. This is a copy of what the request for tenancy approval looks like. This field number 8 says the date that the unit will be available for inspection. Make sure you please give us a date when we can go out and inspect the unit. The landlord, the inspector does not always call or contact you first. We will base our schedule on the date that you put in this box. Also, please make sure you let the Housing Authority know which utilities the tenant is responsible for and which utilities the owner is responsible for. Those that will be paid by the tenant, please put a T in the paid by column. If the owner is going to pay for those utilities, put an O in the paid by column. Also, let us know whether the heating and the cooking and the water heating are either natural gas or electric. This is the second page of the request for tenancy approval that you are going to be required to fill out. In this box, we ask that you please provide, if in the case of an apartment complex, the apartment numbers, the dates in which those apartments were rented, and the rental amounts that you charge for 3 comparable units on your property that are not being assisted by housing. If you are a homeowner, please provide us with addresses and information for 3 comparable units in the subdivision or around the vicinity where your house is, for us to make sure that the rents are rent reasonable. Make sure that you realize that you cannot rent to a voucher holder if they are your parent, child, grandparent, grandchild, sister, brother, or any member of the family, unless you have contacted the housing authorities and we are allowing this as a reasonable accommodation to a family member that may have disabilities, and your particular unit will accommodate that family's disabilities. If you are renting a house that was built before January 1st of 1978 and the family has children that are under the age of 6, you must Certify that your unit does not have any lead-based paint. If it does, we will not be able to rent to that family. Make sure that you realize that the housing authority will not screen the family's behavior or their suitability for tenancy. That is up to you as a landlord. The landlord is required to include the word-for-word provisions of HUD's tenancy addendum, which you will receive upon signing the HAP contract, and the PHA, which is the Rosenberg Housing Authority, will arrange for the inspection of the unit and will notify you when the unit has passed or when the unit is approved for inspection. There are several letters in the inspection packet that I want to draw your attention to before you sign them. One of which, here again, states that it is the sole responsibility of the landlord to collect the rent from the participant if the unit has not passed an inspection. The housing authority will not pay for a unit until it passes the HQS inspection. Also, only whenever the housing assistance payment contract has been executed will we begin to make payment, and it will not be executed until an inspection has been conducted. Once the inspection has been completed and the HAP contract has been signed, if you are a direct deposit landlord, you should receive your check at the next pay date, which is either the 1st or the 15th. If you're receiving a paper check, it should be after the next check run. Make sure that you realize it is your responsibility to immediately contact the housing authority if your tenant or participant has moved or intends to vacate from your unit. When you endorse and sign the housing assistance check, you are telling the housing authority that that participant is currently residing in your unit. You are allowed to charge the participants a security deposit, but it cannot exceed 1 month's rent. And just know that when the tenant vacates, you are required to give the tenant a list of all the items and the amounts charged against the security deposit. Again, a warning, we do not recommend or encourage you to allow the family to move into the unit prior to it passing inspection. If you do that, make sure you realize that the family is 100% responsible for the rent, and the housing authority will not begin payment until after it passes inspection and the HAP contract has been signed. The housing authority allows the tenants to receive a utility allowance, and that is based upon the information that you have put on the RTA that we explained earlier. It lets us know who's responsible for which utility. Those utility allowances that we provide to the participants can be found on our website, and make sure that when you receive your HAP contract, the last page will indicate the allowances. Make sure that those are correct before you sign it. If they are incorrect, please let the housing authority know, and we will make the adjustments. The utility allowances must be the same across the RTA, the lease, and the HAP contract. These are the housing authority's current payment standards. For a 1-bedroom unit, it is $952. For a 2-bedroom unit, it is $1,161. For a 3-bedroom, it is $1,588, and for a 4-bedroom, it is $1,915. This is the maximum allowable subsidy standard that a family is allowed to rent for that particular voucher size. This is not the maximum amount of rent that you can charge. We must still determine that the unit that they are renting is rent reasonable. The lease needs to be provided with a request for inspection. So when you submit the yellow packet, make sure you include a lease. The lease needs to be for 1 year, or if you're starting in the middle of the month, the lease needs to start and then end on the last date of the prior month, that ending date. So, for example, if the unit start date is May the 15th of 2020, the ending date would be April the 30th of 2021. Again, the lease may start on the 1st or the 15th day of the month. And the lease must be signed by the tenant and the landlord. The housing authority will not begin the HAP contract until we have a signed lease by the landlord. And it must be for the approved rent that we would have already negotiated with you before the inspection. Once you receive your HAP contract, it is a 13-page document which also includes the tenancy addendum. Please read through that HAP contract. It explains your rights. It explains your obligations while accepting the monthly HAP payments by the housing authority. The HAP contract has to be dated the same as the lease, and you must sign and return that HAP contract to the housing authority within 60 days of the effective date. Again, a check will not be released until we receive the signed HAP contract. Payment will be calculated and will be paid from the HAP start date to the present. So if the lease started on May the 15th and we do not receive a HAP contract until June 15th, in July you will receive a payment for the partial month of May as well as all of June as well as all of July. Some things to make note of. The HAP contract includes the tenancy addendum. That tenancy addendum becomes part of your lease. It must be included word for word with your lease, and it will supersede your lease. If the unit is not maintained at any time within the year according to HQS inspection requirements or after an HQS inspection, the housing authority will abate payments after forewarning you of the failed items. If the housing authority must abate your payment, you cannot recoup the abated amount from the tenant. The tenant is only responsible for their portion. The abated portion cannot be recouped. The payment will continue once we receive confirmation that the unit has passed inspections. The rent that is charged to the participant family must always be rent reasonable as compared to other unassisted units that are on the premise or compared to like houses in a neighborhood. If you sell the property, if it is a home, a new HAP contract must be signed when changing ownership of the property or of the home. This is a copy of the tenancy addendum. It is part C of the HAP contract, and this is the section that must be included word for word with your lease. HAP checks. In order to receive the HAP check, the housing authority needs to have the following. We need to have the signed HAP contract. We need to have a signed lease. And then the paper checks will arrive 30 to 45 days after execution of the HAP contract. If you are participating in direct deposit, then the check will be deposited into your bank account for the next check run following the executed HAP contract. As I said earlier, we run checks twice a month, at the beginning of the month and in the middle of the month. So when you sign that HAP check, or when that HAP check is deposited into your account and you accept the money, you are certifying the following: that to the best of your knowledge, the members of the family are residing in the unit under the contract, that the contracted unit is safe, decent, and sanitary, that the rent that you are charging for that unit is rent reasonable, and that you are not receiving any additional payments or any other consideration for the rental of that unit from another PHA, from HUD, or from any other private or public source. And you're also certifying that you, here again, are not, as the owner, not the parent, child, grandparent, grandchild, sister, or brother, or any member. Your obligations under the HAP contract. You are required to provide any information that the HAP contract requests of you. You may charge a security deposit that does not exceed 1 month's rent. You must collect the family's portion of the rent and that portion only. The landlord cannot charge more than the established amount that you have told the housing authority. If you are charging more for rent than has been contracted and agreed upon with the housing authority, you will be banned from the program and you and the tenant will be terminated. You are required to enforce the tenant's obligations under the lease. You are the landlord, they are your tenants. You must make sure that your tenants are abiding by your lease. The housing authority cannot get involved in issues between you and your tenant. Please, however, notify the housing authority of the following items, such as non-payment of rent. If you issue a violation for any of these items to the tenant, please supply those same violations to the housing authority, because if they're violating your lease, they are violating the family obligations of the program. If they have damaged your unit, please contact the housing authority. Let us know if you issue them a violation. If they have unauthorized occupants, let the housing authority know. If they have excessive or unpaid utility bills, if the family has vacated the property, if there's any other lease violations. We will address the violations as far as they relate to the family obligations, but it is your responsibility to enforce the tenant's obligations under the lease. If you have any questions regarding the program or regarding something that the tenant is requesting of you, please contact the housing authority first. Do not take the tenant's word for it. You need to notify the housing authority within 60 days of the following. If you are requesting a rent increase, please provide us that rent increase 60 days in advance, as well as 3 comparable units and their rents that they are charging. If you're wanting to change who pays what utilities, that is something else you need to let us know within 60 days in advance. If you don't want to renew the lease, if you're requesting a rent increase, here again, it has to be 60 days prior. You are allowed to have a rent increase 1 per year. You can do this at each lease renewal, and it can be in writing or an email. You can provide us also a formal letter on your letterhead in which you give us the requested amount, as well as 3 rent comparables if available. If you have any questions or concerns, or if you would like to connect with the housing authority through our online portal, you can sign up for Assistance Check at assistancecheck.com. You will need to contact the housing authority and request your PIN. Thank you for your participation in the Housing Choice Voucher Program.